Hello and welcome to the Feminist Frequency Star Trek podcast. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and this week we're talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episodes 2 and 3. And I've got some fantastic returning guests today. I've never had both of you on at the same time. I'm so excited. First, we have Charlie Jane Anders, the woman who writes more books in a year than is actually humanly possible. And I think maybe you're a cyborg, maybe?
That's the best explanation I've heard so far. So yeah, it makes total sense.
Great. And we have Annalee Newitz, who is an author who goes back and forth between fiction and nonfiction and the past and the future in a way that actually makes me want to live across all of time and space. So thank you for that.
Yay, thanks for having me. And I can confirm that Charlie is a cyborg because I only date cyborgs. So, you know.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, that's how that goes, right?
It's a really good policy.
All right. And together, they host one of my favorite podcasts, Our Opinions Are Correct, about science and science fiction and pop culture and everything that we love and nerd out about, but like really smart. Like they actually prepare and know things. It's amazing. So if you haven't, if you're not subscribed yet, go check out Our Opinions Are Correct. Hello.
Hello.
We had a few like technical stuff, so we're all just a little like coming down from the stress of being like, hurry up, fix the problems. If there is a little bit of audio issues, then we apologize in advance, but we're gonna make this work because it's gonna be great. You have both been on this podcast before and on Feminist Frequency Radio, but never together.
I know, this is going to be an awesome crossover event.
I love it.
Yeah, people will finally know that we're not the same person.
You don't actually get confused, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I don't
okay.
think you do.
Not really, not in person.
Not
Got
in
it. Well,
person.
that would be weird. That would be weird. Okay, so we're gonna go into episode 2 and 3, but like so far, like how are you feeling after like the first episode going in with Discovery this season? Like how did you feel about last season? Curious how you're entering this season.
So I loved last season. I love the fact that the show is finally in the far future, as I had always wished it would be. So we got out of the mirror universe and into the future universe. So I'm loving that. And then, you know, obviously for this season, they've got to throw a wrinkle in. And so, you know, Charlie, what do you think about what's going on in this season?
I think so far I'm really enjoying it. I feel like it's sort of interesting because, you know, last season it was all about like basically, you know, figuring out the burn so that Starfleet could start to rebuild. And now we're in the rebuilding part. And I feel like the kind of undercurrent of everything that's going on is that once you start rebuilding, there's going to be politics. There's going to be like this, you know, suddenly there's this politician character who like the president who's just like hanging out and being like, kind of a little bit low-key sleazy, but only low-key sleazy so far. And like, it's just like, that's the kind of message is that like, once you kind of solve the basic structural problems that prevented you from rebuilding, then you're just going to be dealing with political bullshit. And that's just life.
Yeah, they definitely made a big point about how annoying all the politics were, especially in the third episode. But you know, the other thing that I think is so funny is that, you know, first we had the burn to solve, which was kind of an environmental disaster in a sense. And so this season now we've got another environmental disaster, which involves Quajon, which was already a planet that had suffered from a billion really strange environmental disasters. And I'm feeling like, why did we beat up on Quajon again? And of course, my brain immediately goes to the question of what is being allegorized here? Like, what is Quajon supposed to be? It's the same kind of questions I had about Bajor especially in Deep Space Nine, when Bajor is being decolonized. And the Federation is kind of there to sort of smooth over the handover from the Cardassian occupiers to the Bajorans. And it's like, so Quajon has also been kind of colonized and screwed over and had these weird, I want to say, dealings with like space gangsters. I don't know.
Right, there was Emerald Chain. That was like last season. They don't even exist anymore. Emerald Chain is just, they're gone now.
Forget Emerald Chain.
Yeah. Dilithium came back, and like the whole network of like mafia is gone. Apparently, like what?
Yeah. So
although they do reference like the unrest that will return with the anomaly. Like they do say with the burn there was all this unrest, and there's going to be this sort of like, you know, recurring trauma and unrest that's going to happen with the anomaly again. But like, you know, that was very in passing.
Yeah, because it is. Everyone's being re-traumatized by the same kind of thing. This is another kind of like outer space natural disaster, you know, kind of like the burn. Although let's not even talk about how silly the resolution of the burn was a little bit silly.
No way. I think your point about like these sort of ecological disasters again is interesting. It, you know, also the other part of it is that it's another big environmental mystery. Mm-hmm. And you know, like, let's be honest, new Star Trek doesn't do mysteries super well. Like the Picard resolution wasn't great. Like the Burn resolution wasn't great. And I feel a little bit like, do something different. Like I know that last season was, I like, and now like Discovery, like this far into the future is my jam. Like glad we're there. Let's just be Star Trek again. I'm into this. But I'm a little bit like, you're going to disappoint me because you're not very good at resolving these mysteries that you're setting up, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is kind of what Star Trek is. Like, I think part of what Star Trek is about is having like big cosmic weird stuff that's like, there's always an anomaly. There's always a space-time mystery that has to be solved. And it always somehow becomes personal in some way. Like TNG, like every other TNG episode was like, there's an anomaly that's making Riker like talk to a fork. Or there's like an anomaly that's making Crusher kind of the only person left on the Enterprise. And it's like, you know, that was like a go-to storytelling thing, was like space-time anomaly plus somebody working through their personal shit equals a Star Trek story. And so I feel like, you know, I have a lot of patience and like love for that kind of story, because I feel like that is kind of Star Trek's comfort zone in a way.
Riker talking to a fork fucking killed me. It's so true.
Yes, or like Data dreaming of like a weird Freudian chocolate cake. You know, it's always something. It's so funny because you know, the weird thing about this particular anomaly that we're dealing with now is that it has very crystalline entity vibes, I feel like. Maybe that's not weird. Maybe that's actually exactly to underline your point, Charlie Jane, which is that it's just a giant, potentially conscious cosmic mystery. And at the end of episode 2, when we like pulled back from the anomaly and we saw that it was like a giant eyeball within an eyeball within like a kind of a weird black hole illustration, I was like, I love you, Star Trek. Oh my God. Because it was such a perfect, like, it felt very 1960s. It was like, whoa, dude, there's a fucking eyeball.
Okay, let me introduce the episodes to get us all on the same page, and then like let's dive into these. So in episode 2, Anomaly, we learned that we don't know anything about the anomaly. We watch Book struggle with the loss of his entire planet and species, and Tilly has an existential crisis. Stamets learns how to comfort, sort of, kind of. Adira and Gray reckon with Gray's impending transition, and Saru is back, which is exciting. In episode 3, Choose to Live, Michael and her mama and Tilly all go on an adventure. Well, Tilly's still having an existential crisis. That's going to keep going for a little while. They go on an adventure to hunt a rogue ninja who is also the Qowat Malat, or a Qowat Malat. Stamets and Book go hang out with some Vulcan scientists and try to learn more about the anomaly, and Gray gets a body. So that's cool. I feel like I summed these up. I'm trying to do more summaries. Okay, so I kind of fucked up when I was watching these. I watched episode 3 before episode 2, not realizing that that's what I did, because I watched them all yesterday and I just like was like play. So I was like, I was like, holy shit, like they just totally passed over Book's like trauma, and then they just resolved it in one episode. And then I was like, and Saru just shows up and there's no like fanfare about it. I was like, that doesn't seem very Star Trek-y, but okay, like I guess, whatever. And then I was like, oh, I missed a whole episode. Cool. So in my brain, I have to like recategorize the events of what happened in these worlds.
No, I think they did actually a very good job of dealing with the trauma. I thought, that the whole, pretty much, episode 2 was a lot dealing with Book's trauma. And I thought, it got
that's why I was so surprised when I was like, they're doing nothing. I was like, what?
Yeah, I loved episode 2, partly because of how it dealt with Book's trauma and because of, Gray, preparing for his transition. And just in general, I felt like episode 2 did a really good job with all the characters and the relationships. And it felt like it had a really consistent tone and was like kind of really emotionally powerful. And I felt like episode 3 kind of wasn't quite as cohesive, partly because I didn't entirely feel like Book should have gotten over his trauma in one episode. Like, I feel like episode 2 was like Book deals with his trauma, and then in episode 3, he's kind of like finding peace or whatever. And I'm like, he should be finding peace like in episode 7 or 8. Like, I feel like it's too soon. And I felt like, I kind of felt like the Kawat Milat story felt so different and so kind of, at odds with the rest of what we were watching in this episode. It felt like there wasn't really one storyline that was kind of driving the episode. It was a bunch of subplots kind of together. And I really wanted more of Book and Stamets and, Gray and Adira, and kind of wish that had been the whole episode. I feel like that was such important, awesome material. And like, they just were like, well, we need to give Michael and her mom something to do and Tilly. So
I completely agree 100% with your entire analysis of both of those. It was interesting to me because I watched it reverse when I watched the second one. And look, I had to squeeze watching these in because I ran out of time. So I was just like, okay, let's get on with it. Let's like watch this thing and be done with it. And I was so emotional during 2. Like I teared up a lot and I was like, am I PMSing? Like what's happening? I don't understand. But like, I think it actually was a really resonant episode, right? I think that they're, watching Book struggle, watching Michael struggle with like how to support someone. Like how the fuck do you support someone who is going through that? Like it's unimaginable, right? And watching her struggle between, they were very heavy-handed about this, but I was okay with it, of struggling between how to be a captain and how to like be a partner, like a romantic or partner, and like when those things blur together, and watching everyone support that tension too, right? Like where Saru was like, I think it's now time to like, be their lover, like be their partner and like talk to them like a human, and have no one like, everyone's okay with those relationships and those dynamics and switching and like code switching between them and all of that. I liked that modeling.
I loved that modeling. I'm really glad that you brought that up because I thought that was such a tender scene and like so beautifully evokes like what it would be like to have a healthy workplace where people, do sometimes date each other, but they deal with it like healthy grown-ups. And one of the things that I thought was really key to that scene where we watch her code switch from captain to partner is that we learn, I didn't even know this, that they have some kind of cone of silence mode in their communicators. And so this kind of, iridescent globe forms around Burnham, and she's able to talk directly to Book, and he knows that it's private, and of course we know that it's private. It must
be future technology. I love all the future technology that they've just been like, we're in the future, so now we can have all of this cool stuff. Because I immediately was like, how can they have a private thing? She's on the deck. This is going to be so uncomfortable. Oh my God. Like I was feeling so much tension around the fact that she was going to have this intimate moment in front of everyone. And so I was like, fuck yeah, this technology's dope.
Well, and it also, the thing to me that's so fascinating is that it's not just it's about the technology, which is actually probably pretty simple compared to like, the ships that like break apart and reform again and stuff, the programmable matter. And it's a great example of how technological capabilities are tied up with social norms and that they have a social norm in this future, I guess, that people should be allowed to switch into private conversations at any time, and that it's encouraged, and that's part of their communication strategy, right? That they actually have communications technology that isn't on 100% surveillance mode all the time. Because I think that's, for those of us who think about the surveillance technology of Star Trek, which is a lot of us, it's pretty clear that everybody is being spied on constantly, right? I mean, like, if you're in the Enterprise, like, you can be located at any time. And this is an example. This is the first example I recall that we actually see privacy technology. And to me, it was really exciting to imagine that is part of what makes this future better, is that built into their communication technology is this go be private thing. And I hope it was like encrypted and that it was not, logged, right? Like, we don't know, but, it could have been logged, in which case, well, then I take back what I'm saying about it being utopian.
Yeah, I mean, I loved all the stuff with Michael and Book so much in episode 2 that I remember watching episode 3, there was like a moment where early on in the episode where Michael comes up to Book and is like, hey, I'm going to borrow your ship and I'll bring it back waxed and washed. And it just was like, it seemed very weirdly casual and kind of like, yeah, hey, whatever, dude, I'm taking your ship. And like, which that ship is all he has left. And like, and it felt like, he just lost his homeworld and his family and stuff. And it's like, he could have an anxiety attack about losing that ship. And like, it's dealt with very casually and nobody's like, oh yeah, it's just like, it felt like a weird note after everything that we'd gotten in episode 2. And, and I kept wondering, where the heck is Grudge the cat? Like, is Grudge the cat on the ship when they're going on this mission to deal with the lesbian Romulan nuns? I just decided they're lesbians. I'm sorry. But when they're
they
like
definitely are.
They're dealing with the excessively candid Romulan nuns, ninja nuns. Is Grudge with Michael and her mom? Is Grudge with Book on his way to the Niver Science Institute? Is Grudge on the Discovery? Like, they don't tell us. I was actually worried about that cat.
I was also worried about the cat because in episode 2, the thing that I loved was that we actually have a moment where he's like, I'm going to go strap him in. And I was like, oh, the cat has a little place where he's safe and strapped in. That's good. And that was kind of reassuring. And then also I'm going to bring your ship back waxed and washed. It's like, come on, really? The anachronism of that in 900 years?
That reference, I was like, oh,
come
and because Tilly makes a reference to an Everest-sized problem or whatever, and then she's like, oh, that's she explains it, and you're like, okay, thank God you did that. Like, not everyone would know what that reference is. And Wash and Wax, I was like, do you have cars? You can have programmable matter. You're not waxing fucking cars anymore?
No, you're using nanotechnology to eat all of the stuff off the outside of the hull and then repair the hull. And
exactly.
It was a very facepalm moment. It was not a good moment. Okay, so I think we need to talk about 2 things in episode 3 and that I want to hear from you guys about. First of all, we need to talk about Gray's transition to embodiment. But the other thing is the Coat Malat and what happened to them in terms of justice. I really want to know what the fuck is going on there. What is being modeled? What is the message there? Because I felt like it was trying to say that they were engaging in restorative justice by letting the the Niver folks deal with their own people, but at the same time they were kind of indicating that would mean that there wouldn't be justice for the people who'd been killed. Does that make sense? I felt like they were kind of having it both ways, and it felt very unsatisfying and very kind of suggesting that in order to have international relations or interstellar relations, we just have to accept that some cultures are have inferior justice systems, or that they're just going to murder people, and that's just how they are. They're just murdery people or something. It felt very I guess, politically incoherent is what I want to say.
The first one, I mean, Gray's embodiment, I was sort of like, I thought it was cool, but then like that moment towards the end where like, Adira is like, I'm not going to leave your side. I'm going to like talk to you and I'm going to bring you back. And then it turns out that actually really did work and that did help. And that was the part where I got choked up in this episode. I got so teary and I was like, oh, that's such a wonderful metaphor for how we help each other, like to, with our transitions and with like embodiment and everything. And like, I really loved that. That was freaking great. I thought that was amazing.
Me too. I was totally crying.
I usually love Culber's advice, but this time around, Culber's advice to Adira felt really weird, where it was basically like, well, there's nothing we can do and you should just stop worrying about your partner. And like, it just felt like there was a lot in this episode of people being told that they should just like not think about stuff or not worry about stuff. And I was like, that's not healthy. But I loved the whole Gray storyline. I loved how it ended. I thought it was so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, it's so beautiful. I love it. And like, I was glad they didn't try to stretch it out, like to have it like wait another 2 episodes to find out if Gray gets a body or if it works or whatever. So that was a plus. I mean, I feel like the thing with, the ending with the Kawat Malat kind of getting custody of the killer nun, whose name I don't remember right now. I'm sorry. I felt like that was kind of intentionally ambiguous, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes too much ambiguity can be kind of counterproductive. And I think that might have been a little bit of counterproductive ambiguity this time.
Yeah, I also agree that it was weird. And for me, it sat in that tension that I talked about on the last episode around the military versus the political machine, and how like I keep wanting Star Trek to not be about military, but it is, right? Like it is. And we have to kind of navigate and deal with that. And so, for the president, Riddick, I forgot her name already. She was like, I'm trying to build relations so that they join the Federation. So we're like handing off the prisoner, so to speak, or whatever. But I didn't read it as like, we don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they said what they were going to do. And they didn't imply that they were or were not going to do anything. But we are supposed to interpret it as there will be no justice at all, or there will be no consequences for that behavior. And that we just did it as I'm not Starfleet, but that the Federation just did it as a political move, which feels more like building the tension between the military branch and the political branch in this world, right? Which is part of what's happening between Michael and the president. Yeah, it was very weird. And I agree with you. Like, I don't think it was good modeling of, I don't know how they build conflict around this in a way outside of doing what they did, but being more clear about it. Because it would be great if they're like, yeah, we have this whole other process of the way that we handle things. And like, this is how we're going to handle our people. And thank you for trusting us to do that, And for Michael to be like, but she murdered somebody, so she needs to be imprisoned. Well, I don't know. The whole thing, I didn't like that at all.
It was really weird. And I think you kind of put your finger on it when you said that it could have really easily been fixed if we'd heard them just say like, here's how we manage justice. And like, we're going to do this. It would have like been 2 sentences that they could have done that in. And instead it's left mysterious. And we are really left to feel like they might not do anything. And it builds tension, but it also makes it seem like this other group is like lawless or callous or, almost like semi-terrorist, which is also, the Kawat Malat are not supposed to be that. They're supposed to be like paladins or something, they're not supposed to be just random murderers.
Well, and they're also, it's Vulcan. They're Vulcans, right? So like the hyperlogicalness of it all and how they would approach this thing, like that would be so interesting to explore, of like, what does justice look like in a culture that is so focused on logic and rationality, right?
Or on this like radical honesty of the Kawat Malat. I guess the Kawat Malat are not going to be the ones to administer justice. It's going to be the future Vulcan group. So that's another weird thing.
Also, are they building tension because they were going to come back to this? Like, did they leave it ambiguous because, like, there's going to be something about Michael and her mom or whatever? Like, this episode really did suck, actually, now that I'm, like, putting it in the context of everything. When Tilly is like, my mom is a monster and awful and hates children, and if she was here right now, I would hug her. I was like, this is not doing what you think it's doing, y'all.
Not a good analogy.
No. I'm like, I see what you're trying. You're trying to be like, stop fighting and love each other because you have each other now. But like, that didn't fucking work. Sorry.
I felt like it worked as just an illustration of how kind of Tilly is a little bit of a weirdo. And like, I felt it was like a moment of like, Tilly's a weirdo. And she sometimes says things that are kind of inappropriate.
I didn't think it was inappropriate. Also, I fucking love Tilly, and I'm loving Tilly this season. I'm just like, her being weird and like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say weird. Her anxiety manifesting the way it does, like, we don't usually see that in TV, right? Where you're kind of stuttering and you're kind of afraid to say things and you talk a little bit too much. And I'm like, I identify with all of this. Like, this is so great. And I really like that they let her be all of that. And there's a couple of moments at the end of 2 that I really, really loved. I thought it was really good mental health modeling. When Tilly is asking to basically go into therapy, she asks Culver, like, if they can talk about it. And then she goes, that wasn't so hard. It was awkward, but it wasn't so hard. And I'm like, yes, exactly.
I know. I loved that so much.
Yeah. And then there's a scene with Adira and Gray where Adira is like, I don't know how to talk about this. And Gray just says, you just did. And I'm like, I'm dying here. I'm like, look, I run a mental health hotline. I was like, yes, all of this, give it to me.
Yeah, all of that stuff was so great. And part of what's making this season kind of, weepy is that I feel like there's a lot of like therapeutic stuff in every episode. But yeah, they are falling down a little bit on politics, I think. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about Quajon and how Quajon has this weird backstory with, I keep wanting to call the Emerald Chain the blockchain, so I'm just going to call them the blockchain. So remember how the blockchain was like forcing Quajon into an economic relationship, which was like obviously supposed to be like a post-colonial fuck up relationship, right? Where they have to give up this beautiful psychic worm part of their ecosystem in order to have food. They're starving because of these ocean locust things. So is Quajon supposed to be like Ukraine? Are they supposed to be, do you know what I mean? Like, what are they trying to model there? Are they trying to model like a client state of a kleptocracy? Are they like trying to model like a post-colonial nation in Southeast Asia? Like, I know it doesn't have to be a one-to-one correspondence, and I apologize for being so freaking literal minded, but I'm like, what the hell is going on here with Quajon? And like the fact that it's now been destroyed, I don't know. I don't like it.
As someone who's like, an OG Star Trek fan, Star Trek was originally designed to be a Western, basically. Like they said Gene Roddenberry went around saying, it's a Western, but in space. And like, that was his big pitch in like 1965 or whatever, when he was trying to get the show off the ground. And I feel like this current era of Discovery where like the Federation is weaker and there's like not as much of like a peacekeeping force in the galaxy, I think they keep trying to find ways to make it like the wild frontier a little bit. And like, basically you have these frontier towns that are getting attacked by bandits, or they're getting like, there's like a bad guy with like a black hat who's like imposing his kind of rule on the town. And I feel like both Quajon and the like people that the Qowat Milat nun were helping in the latest episode are examples of like frontier towns where there's rough justice and we just have to like protect these people against the bandits. And so there's like, I think that's kind of what they're going for.
That is actually a really great way of thinking about it. That makes a lot of sense. And that would mean that Quajon is basically like the frontier town that's been burned to the ground, like it's been abandoned. And so that's, sad, but it's just the way it is in the frontier. So, yeah. Okay, I accept it.
Great. We solved it. Another thing I was just thinking about why the her name's Javini, why her storyline with the didn't really land. Like, there's probably a lot of reasons, but one is like she could have just communicated what she was doing. That is the most irritating thing to me, is like, just fucking communicate. If you can communicate a thing, then don't make that the point of conflict. And so even as she's going, like Michael figured it out and said, is this what you're doing? When she could have just been like, I'm trying to stop a genocide, or like, the extermination of these people. And everyone would have been like, oh, okay, dope. Like, cool. That's great. So that I felt that was really unsatisfying. But because I think the larger politics are kind of weird and wonky right now. I am really I'm finding a lot of joy in the characters themselves. And so, I was talking about how I really like Tilly. I just want to kind of call out, I was sort of making a joke about her existential crisis, but I think there's something really like interesting around this. Like, she's like trying to get outside of her comfort zone, and she's uncomfortable in it, and she's also too comfortable in it, and trying to be like, I just saw this horrible thing happen, and I experienced this horrible thing, and nothing feels right. And like, it is a type of trauma, and it is a type of trauma response that she's dealing with, and trying to find her place. Like, let's not forget that they can never go home, right? Like, they're stuck in this new time. And so I think the combination of Tilly being super anxious and not communicating like everybody else, like I love how she is, and having this, like, I have to find myself and my place here. I'm really liking that storyline for her. The other one here is Stamets. So historically, this podcast fucking hates Stamets, but like we've grown to love him, and I really liked the stuff around him in book in episode 2, where like before he goes onto the ship as a hollow, he looks at Culber and is like, I don't know how to be around him. And just that, like, the frankness of that, the candor, if you will, since they use that word a million times in the next episode. And watching him really not know how to comfort someone. Like, I love this modeling of like, yeah, you might not know how to do it. And then him just being really honest and being like, I feel uncomfortable around you because you're bringing up these things about me, and watching them connect over that. He doesn't need to be fake about it, which is what I think he was trying to do, is like, how do I comfort you when this doesn't feel right to me? But when he does what feels right to him, it works, right? They build a small bridge between each other.
I'm a huge Stamets fan. I love that character. I think he's amazing, and I love that like the show has increasingly been pushing towards basically this queer family with like Stamets and Culber as the parents and Adira and Gray as their kids. And I'm just like, everything about that just makes me so happy and just makes me feel like this is like the future I want. At the same time, I don't know. I really like Stamets and Book, like as like their kind of relationship getting a lot of time. Like, one of the things I really appreciated, episode 3, I had mixed response to, as I kind of said, but I liked Stamets and Book kind of becoming better friends over the course of it. And like, Stamets being concerned for Book having to re-traumatize himself, and Book actually being like, no, this was cathartic for me. I felt like that was all really great. And I feel like I'm actually kind of now here for the Stamets Book kind of bromance a little bit. I don't know. I like that he's kind of like, they've added, like when Stamets was first introduced in the first season, he was just kind of like your standard, like Starfleet know-it-all jerk, like that engineer who gets punched by B'Elanna Torres in like the first few episodes of Voyager. He was kind of that guy originally, but he's gotten a lot more layers, and I feel like he has this really sweet, tender side to him, which they're finding ways to bring out without it feeling too kind of fakey, touchy-feely or whatever. I don't know. I'm here for it. I really like that aspect of both episodes.
You mean Paris? Didn't she punch out Paris, the fucking obnoxious blonde dude? On Voyager?
No, she did not punch Paris. She did tap that, but no.
Oh my God, it's been so long. I fucking
B'Elanna and Paris
completely forgot.
married. They had a kid.
Gross.
They had a kid together, dude. Sorry, human. They had a kid together.
Completely forgot that. You're totally right.
She punched a... It was actually one of the things that annoyed me about Voyager is they introduced this character who's like a know-it-all engineer. He gets punched by B'Elanna and whines about it for like an episode and a half. And then we don't see him again for like 5 seasons of the show. And then they finally bring him back only to kill him off. And I was like, what's this dude been doing? This is so totally a tangent, but I was like, what's this dude been doing for the last 5.5 seasons? And he suddenly like just turns up again so they can kill him. And I'm just like, has he just been skulking in the back of engineering, kind of like glowering at B'Elanna the entire time? And we just
He's
didn't
been
see
like sexually harassing like all of the female engineers like that. And finally, you know, they killed him. Frontier justice, man.
I just remember that bothering me a lot because it's like, don't bring back this character who we haven't seen for 5.5 years, like with no explanation of where he's been. It's like it's not that big a ship. Anyway, whatever. Sorry.
Also, Paris is a pilot, and I'm a moron because I completely forgot that. So that's fine.
He also did have grub babies with Janeway. Remember? The important
Lizard babies.
They're like
lizard.
like grubs. They're like blobs.
There's an action figure.
They're actually like when they're born, they look kind of like grubs, but I think that they grow into like salamanders. That's like their adult form. But when they show the babies, they're like wriggly grubs. So like basically they de-evolve and have sex because Janeway would only have sex with Paris if she had completely de-evolved, I think is the message.
I think they hyper-evolved.
Oh, right. They hyper-evolved. Right. I'm confusing it with the de-evolving thing of a different episode. Yeah. So they hyper-evolve, and the future of Homo sapiens, I guess, is salamanders, which makes sense. And yeah, so now they have hyper-evolved salamander babies on a planet that they just abandoned.
Yeah, they abandoned their babies. It's really sad. There's an action figure of Lizard Paris and Lizard Janeway and their lizard babies. And I got to interview the guy who played Paris, and I asked him if he had it. And he was like, I've got it somewhere. I don't know. But he knew about it. He was like, yeah, that's an action figure that I owned.
I love Star Trek so much.
Me too. This criticism is out of love for sure. Yeah. No, I'm happy about the queer family that we're watching evolve on the ship. And those are characters who I love and want to continue watching. Tig Notaro will hopefully come back and be like another grumpy parent as part of this group.
Let's hope. I got nothing to say. I think I saw her in the trailer for like the whole season, so I'm pretty sure.
I think she's gonna make some appearances. Yeah. So yeah, I think like, you know, we just need to get back to a structure in the episodes where they have an A plot and a B plot, and they don't try to have like A, B, C, and D. You know, I think that's the lesson of episode 3.
I agree. Discovery was a disaster for so long that I am accepting that like I now love these characters and that they are being developed really well. So like I'll give it another season before I'm like, okay, you get your politics together, people. Come on, let's do this. Let's do this better. But okay, let's wrap things up by giving these episodes a rating. So our rating system doesn't matter or mean anything. So you can choose to rate whatever you want. Do you want them to be tachyon bursts or anomalies or moon-shaped ships? Whatever you want. Charlie Jane, how do you rate these episodes?
Yeah, so I give the episode 2 like 5 salamander babies out of 5 salamander babies. Like it was definitely like, and I wanted to just say that I've loved Discovery from the beginning, but I feel like it's definitely gotten better since they went to the future. But yeah, episode 2, 5 salamander babies out of 5. Episode 3, I would say 3 salamander babies out of 5.
Great. Annalee, where are you landing?
I would give episode 2 6 psychic worms out of 10. I guess I'm doing 1 to 10 ratings here. And I would give episode 3 5 psychic worms out of 10. So they were pretty close in my mind.
Yeah. I think I'm more Charlie Jane on this one. I'm doing like 4.5 moon-shaped ships. I really liked that their ship looked like a planet. I thought that was pretty cool. And then episode 3, I'm going to give, like a 3.5. I feel I have a really hard time giving ratings to these Star Trek episodes because all of it is on, like, I feel like I have like 20 different curves. So like there's the curve of all of Discovery and then there's the curve of like the season itself. But overall, I'm happy where it's going. All right, y'all. You want to plug anything? Where can people find you? What are you working on? How many books do you have coming out this week? What's going on in your worlds?
Always want to plug our podcast, Our Opinions Are Correct, which is bi-weekly, and you can find it anywhere where podcasts are being purveyed. My book, Four Lost Cities, which is a story about archaeologists who are looking into how cities get abandoned in ancient history, was just ranked by the Smithsonian as one of the best history books of the year. So you should pick it up. It just came out.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So love that Smithsonian rating.
Yeah, I want to second the plug for Our Opinions Are Correct. And, if you like listening to us noodle about Star Trek and other things, definitely check that out. I have a young adult trilogy that is very, very, very Star Trek-y, especially the first book of the trilogy, Victories Greater Than Death, which came out in April of 2021. The sequel, Dreams Bigger Than Heartbreak, comes out in April 2022, and that's done. I just finished the page proof, so that's locked and loaded. It's waxed and washed. But yeah, and book 3, I'm still in the middle of writing, so wish me luck.
Amazing. And don't you have a book that just came out, like just now?
Yeah, I have a book of short stories called Even Greater Mistakes, and that's also been super fun.
Like, did you just forget about it?
No, I thought this is a Star Trek podcast. I should just mention the books that are like Star Trek-y.
That is not true. You should mention all of the things.
Charlie Jane also has a book of writing advice that just came out this year called Never Say You Can't Survive, which is really awesome and quite therapeutic. So while you're thinking about, good modeling, definitely pick up a copy of that too.
And we did a whole Feminist Frequency Radio episode on it, so we'll link that in the show notes. Thank you both so much for joining us. As always, we love having you here. But that's it for this episode. I will be back in 2 weeks with more special guests talking about episodes 4 and 5. Plus, you can catch us on Feminist Frequency Radio every Wednesday. You can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us.